the shots. Parents call 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 the shots.
There are pockets and significant pockets of the country where vaccines aren't happening because of those, the anti-vaxxers or whatever you want to call them, who have made significant headway in trying to convince parents they shouldn't vaccinate children.
Parents should pursue catching up their children on vaccines if they've made those delays, and support each other in pursuing it. Vaccines among our pharmaceuticals and biologics are among the safest that we have and the most effective we have in preventing infectious disease.
Vaccines are one of the most important measures of preventative medicine to protect the population from diseases and infections. They have contributed to decreasing rates of common childhood diseases and in some cases have even wiped out some diseases that were common in years past. However, there has been a recent rise in anti-vaccination sentiments surrounding beliefs that vaccines cause more harm than benefits to the health of the children who receive them. The premise of the anti-vaccination movement can also be contributed to the demonization of vaccinations by news and entertainment outlets, as well as false information spread by seemingly trustworthy medical officials. This has caused vaccination rates to sustain a surprising drop in some Western countries. The decrease in vaccinations has led to recent outbreaks of diseases that were thought to be eliminated, such as the measles infection. Still, other reasons for the anti-vaccination movement exist and can be due to personal reasons, such as religious and secular views. The decrease in vaccinations poses a threat to the herd immunity that the medical world has worked hard to achieve. Global communities are now more connected than ever, which translate to a higher probability of the transmission of diseases. The only thing that can protect populations against a rapidly spreading disease is the disease's resistance created by herd immunity when the majority are immune after vaccinations. Given the highly contagious nature of diseases like measles, vaccination rates of 96% to 99% are necessary to preserve herd immunity and prevent future outbreaks. Fear of vaccines and myths against them are not a new phenomenon. Opposition to vaccines goes far back as the 18th century when, for example, Reverend Edmund Macy in England called the vaccines diabolical operations. He declared these vaccines as an attempt to oppose God's punishments upon man for his sins. Similar religious opposition was seen in the quote, New World even earlier, such as in the writings of Reverend John Williams in Massachusetts, who also cited similar reasons for his opposition to vaccines, claiming that they were the devil's work. However, opposition against vaccines was not only manifested in theological arguments. Many also objected to them for political and legal reasons. After the passage of laws in Britain in the mid-19th century making it mandatory for parents to vaccinate their children, anti-vaccine activists formed the Anti-Vaccination League in London. The League emphasized that its mission was to protect the liberties of the people, which were being invaded by the Parliament and its compulsory vaccination laws. The anti-vaccination movement was most strongly rejuvenated in recent years by the publication of a paper by a former British doctor and researcher, Andrew Wakefield, which suggested credence to the debunked claim of a connection between the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, or the MMR vaccine, and the development of autism in young children. Several studies published later disproved a causal association between the MMR vaccine and autism. Wakefield drew severe criticism for his flawed and unethical research methods, which he used to draw his data and conclusions. A journalistic investigation also revealed that there was a conflict of interest with regard to Wakefield's publication because he had received funding from advocates against vaccine manufacturers, which he obviously did not disclose to either his coworkers nor medical authorities. The damage, however, was already done, and the myth was spread to many different parts of the world, especially Western Europe and North America. In the UK, for example, the MMR vaccination rate dropped from 92% in 1996 to 84% in 2002. In 2003, the rate was as low as 61% in some parts of London, far below the rate needed to avoid an epidemic of measles. In Ireland in 1999 to 2000, the national immunization level had fallen below 80%, and in part of northern Dublin, the level was around 60%. In the US, the controversy following the publication of the study led to a decline of about 2% in terms of parents obtaining the MMR vaccine for their children in 1999 to 2000. Even after later studies explicitly and thoroughly debunked the alleged MMR autism link, the drop in vaccination rates persisted, and the usage of this study's information is still relevant in anti-vaccination arguments in North America and Western Europe. As a result, in the drop in vaccination rates, multiple breakouts of measles have occurred throughout different parts of the previously immune Western world, infecting dozens of patients and even causing several deaths. In the UK in 1996, 56 people contracted measles. In 2006, this number increased to 449. In 2008, measles was declared an epidemic in the UK for the first time in 14 years. In Ireland, an outbreak occurred in 2000 and 1,500 cases and 3 deaths were reported. The outbreak was reported to have occurred as a direct result of the drop in vaccination rates following the MMR controversy. In France, more than 22,000 cases of measles were reported from 2008 to 2011. The United States has not been an exception, with outbreaks occurring most recently in 2008, 2011, and 2013. Perhaps the most infamous example of a measles outbreak in the United States occurred between 2014 and 2015. The outbreak was believed to originate from the Disneyland Resort in Anaheim, California, and resulted in an estimated 125 people contracting the disease. It was estimated that MMR vaccination rates among the exposed population in which secondary cases have occurred might be as low as 50%, and likely no higher than 86%. Physicians in the region were criticized for deviating from the CDC's Center for Disease Control and Prevention recommended vaccination schedule and/or discouraging vaccination. Access to medical information online has dramatically changed the dynamics of the healthcare industry and patient-physician interactions. Medical knowledge that was previously bound to textbooks and journals or held primarily by medical professionals is now accessible to the public, which has shifted the power from doctors as exclusive managers of a patient's care to the patients themselves. This has led to the recent establishment of a shared decision-making between patients and healthcare physicians. While this is beneficial in some ways, the circulation of false and misleading information found on the internet can also lead to negative consequences, such as parents not giving consent to having their children vaccinated. When it comes to vaccines, the false information is plentiful and easy to find. An analysis of YouTube videos about immunization have found that 32% opposed vaccination and that these had higher ratings and more views than pro-vaccine videos. Online anti-vaccination authors use numerous tactics to further their agendas. These tactics include, but are not limited to, skewing science, shifting hypotheses, censoring opposition, attacking critics, and claiming to be pro-safe vaccines and not anti-vaccines, claiming that vaccines are toxic or unnatural, and more. Not only are these tactics deceitful and dishonest, they are also effective on many parents. Opposition to the MMR vaccine among parents leads to an ethical dilemma that can be analyzed using both medical ethics and moral principles. Patients are entitled to the right to refuse vaccination using, quote, our children, our choice. However, healthcare providers are morally obligated to recommend the safest preventative measures of disease to avoid harm to society at all costs.
What are your thoughts on the anti-vaccination movement as a whole?
I believe that parents have a very real fear of vaccinations, and I understand it. But I don't think they have all the facts. I don't believe that they're educated on the subject, and I think it's a movement by parents and grandparents and um, who also are in the movement of the organic food, like all the options for um, different avenues to take. And I don't know if this is the best avenue to take for your child because they are so susceptible to serious diseases like measles, hepatitis B, which can cause a lifelong problem with your liver complications and later on possibly cancer. So I think by not getting your children vaccinated, um, they're going to be susceptible to diseases like that, and I think that would be difficult to live with. If knowing that, okay, I'm not going to give my child these vaccinations. It's a very small amount, but it will build up your immune system. So if you are in contact as a child to diseases like the measles, pertussis, which is whooping cough, a very large number of children contract whooping cough, over 200,000 a year. And if they're not vaccinated, then, thousands and thousands of children will die from it. So um, I believe in it strongly. I understand that there are some side effects and complications, but I think the positives outweigh the negatives.
Why do you think the anti-vaccination movement has gained popularity over the past couple of years?
I think it's kind of like along the same lines as natural, organic. I don't want to put this in my body, so I don't want to put that in my body. And I think it's all too many options, maybe too many of like over analyzing and questioning every tiny little thing and not always trusting the process.
Where do you think the stigma against vaccines came from?
I think it happened many, many years ago when children were late or right after a vaccination, they were diagnosed with autism. I have a good friend whose friend's son was vaccinated when he was a child. I think it was a toddler. He wasn't a baby. He went home, very, very high fever, never the same since. They're relating it to the thermosol, I think it's called, which is a preservative in the injections. And many, many years ago, instead of grouping the injection like the MMR, they used to do it separately. And so the thermosol, I think it's called, was in each injection. So say you got 6 or 7 in one visit, you would have a very you could have a toxic level of thermosol in your blood, and some children didn't react well to it. So, some people say it's hooey, but I've read articles like that as well. So, yeah.
Do you think the anti-vaccination movement will have fatal consequences?
Absolutely, I do. Like I said, there's a lot of diseases that are extremely contagious to babies, children, and teenagers. The HPV virus, they say you should receive when you're, I think it's at 12 and up, and it's a series of injections, and they have proven that this virus can cause cervical cancer or ovarian cancer. And so I think that could be something to look into, and cervical cancer could be on the decline if women in particular and males were vaccinated with this HPV injection.
To conclude, the rise of anti vaccination movements in parts of the Western world pose a dire threat to people's health and the collective herd immunity. People of all ages have fallen victim to recent outbreaks of measles, one of the most notable eliminated diseases that made a comeback as a direct consequence for not reaching the immunization threshold for MMR vaccines. These outbreaks not only put a strain on national healthcare systems, but also cause fatal casualties. Therefore, it is of the utmost importance that all medical officials, physicians, researchers, educators, and governments unite to curb the influence of the anti vaccination movement targeting parents. Research has shown that even parents favorable to vaccination can be confused by the ongoing debate, leading them to question their choices. Many parents lack basic knowledge of how vaccines work, as well as access to accurate information explaining the importance of the process. Furthermore, those with the greatest need for knowledge about vaccination seem most vulnerable to this information, likely parents. Further, we must effectively combat the wrongful demonization of vaccinations through social media and news media platforms. A qualitative study that explored how parents respond to competing media messages about vaccine safety concluded that personal experiences, value systems, and level of trust in health professionals are essential to parenting decision making about immunization. Therefore, to combat the anti vaccination movement, there must be a strong emphasis on helping parents develop trust in health professionals and relevant authorities, educating them on facts and figures, debunking the myths peddled by the anti vaccination movements, and even introducing legislation that promotes vaccination, if not mandating it.
All right, for our next segment, I'm going to walk around the Galleria Mall and ask people what their opinion on the vaccination movement. Let's go. What are your thoughts on the vaccination movement? Are you pro or anti-vax?
I'm pro because I think some people don't have access to that, which is basic because they don't have an immune system that can protect them, and the vaccination helps it.
What's your opinion on the vaccination movement?
I'm all for vaccinations. The vaccinations only work if everyone does them. So everyone needs to do them.